What's going on, everybody? Let's talk about Wartales, the new community patch edition. What is this? Patch number 6. Basically, this was a ghost patch. I had no idea that this was coming out right before release. Basically, my thought process is that they wanted to get community feedback on changes to the difficulty level and balancing and all sorts of new things that were originally planned on being in the release coming up in a week and a half, but they wanted to get feedback on it before they went to release, so there wasn't going to be a bunch of backlash upon release. So this right here is basically the balance patch and difficulty tweaks that we were expecting on release, except it's here now. So let's go ahead and dig right on into it. Most factions now have additional passives. So for those of you who have hit level 6 or higher, you've noticed that there are faction passives whenever you go into a fight. Well, now there's multiple faction passives, and these faction passives makes things hard, and not just a little bit, but I mean it actually makes it a lot harder. And now I am no longer concerned about the game being too easy for you to be able to simply steamroll them. For example, bandit faction, just as an example here, whenever a bandit unit takes 2 attacks from the same unit in the same turn, they gain dodge. Now currently there's a bug on it where dodge doesn't get removed until the end of the round, but essentially dodge is the same mechanic that's applied on merchants. Basically, they dodge the next source of damage or attack. So in theory, bandits are supposed to gain dodge, and then they dodge the next attack whenever you dogpile them with a single unit. Easy way to fight around this, or work around this rather, is for you to simply attack them once, or you can attack them twice and then just move on to a different unit entirely, or you can do large sweeping AoE attacks and just hit everybody once with an AoE attack and then move on to a new group and do another AoE attack. Or you can just be a tank and, you know, hit them once and sit there with riposte on or something like that. That's just an example of the new passives. Another new passive that was included is going to be for the guard faction. The guard faction increases their attack of opportunity damage by 25%, and their attacks of opportunity apply confusion, which prevents you from gaining buffs. That's awesome. Not for us as players, but that's awesome in terms of difficulty. And then on top of that, this counters riposte, if you think about it. So whenever you get hit by an attack of opportunity, it prevents you from being able to gain riposte. Yeah. Riposte builds, riposte spam isn't going to work too well against guards, but riposte spam will work on bandits. So basically each faction at this point now has such a niche and specific strategy around them that you're going to have to actually work around this and develop strategies to counter these new passives for each faction. And that's great. It adds in a lot more complexity to your overall Wartales game, and I think this is a step in the right direction. Now, my biggest concern at this point is that I actually really want to take on a Battle Brothers approach to this. I would really like to see a new feature implemented that is similar to how trading posts are, except let me choose which units I want to bring into battle. Not necessarily by parking them into a travel post, but let me opt to have a couple units basically stay out of the fight and not have to deal with them in turn order. For example, in Battle Brothers, you're able to have a reserve slot and you can just leave your units in reserve and then cycle them in and out based off of who you're fighting, and then you can change your entire strategy and party composition based off of that, right? So let me have that as a feature. If that can become a thing, oh, this game's going to get so much better, because then you'd be able to custom build each unit, put them into reserves if you don't necessarily need to use them against the battle you're going up against, and you'll be able to finally get all of your different types of coverage per se or strategies in order, and then you'd really be able to have fun, and no longer will you be worried about having a war pony that just gets murdered as soon as you get a war pony. You can actually level up and get everything else situated and put your war pony in reserve so it doesn't join you in every single battle. Yeah, I don't use war ponies, but yeah, it's just an example, guys. So that is just a small tidbit of the information that got added in here, and we're going to cover the rest of the patch notes. We basically got a new game starting point. They used basically playing cards, or calling cards rather, for selecting in the starting UI for creating a new game. It's a nice amount of polish. I really enjoy it. I know that this is something that doesn't necessarily add to the gameplay, but it really does help out new players in the sense of making the game feel more complete, if you catch my drift. It's just that nice amount of flavor that really helps bring it together. Beyond this though, players are able to now actively and dynamically change the difficulty level of their game. This is a huge quality of life improvement, guys. Now, if you're going up against a fight and you're realizing that it's just way beyond your scope and you really are having a hard time completing the fight, and you realize that maybe you're going to have a bad time with this and it's just not being fun anymore, you can turn down the difficulty and do whatever you want. It's a single player game. Have fun with it. This game's really meant for you guys to enjoy, so feel free to dial up the difficulty level if you feel like it's just a little too easy, and dial it back if you're finding it a little bit more challenging than what you deem desirable. Beyond that, there is going to be a little bit of economy balancing. They made it basically easier for you to survive starting out. I know when I first started in the game, the economy seemed very, very difficult, and there's been multiple patches since then, so I can't even tell you what build I was on whenever I did that. But now the economy is a lot more forgiving for new players, especially on easier difficulty levels. At higher difficulty levels, it's pretty close to the same thing, if not a little bit easier, but that is mostly meant to be geared towards early game. Towards mid and late game, things start to get closer to what they currently are, which by the time you're at mid and late game, you are most likely rolling in money to the point where you don't really care about it. Also, they have added in new unit types into each faction. So for example, the outlaws and the bandits now have criminals instead of just wrongdoers as unique units and all the other things like henchmen and whatnot. Well, now they have criminals added into the mix as well. There's multiple other units that were added in. There's an entire new faction of units that got added in, the Alizar soldiers. Something tells me that they're gonna play a bigger part coming up in the release when they, you know, release Alizar as a region, and I'm really excited for that. There have been a lot of balancing changes in skills and weapons. They have dialed a lot of things back to the point where things aren't nearly as strong. For example, Dagon's hammer, which used to be easily the best DPS weapon in the game, well, instead of it doing 60% damage on all of your attacks with it, now it does 40% damage. So you're still doing 120% damage after 3 hits with it, but you're no longer doing 180% damage and proccing all sorts of stuff and everything like that. They've nerfed quite a few abilities by dialing it back just a smidge, you know, 10% here, 20% there. And honestly, there's so many balancing changes that I'm not going to be able to cover it all in this patch review video. But basically, this has been a huge step in the right direction to nerfing the glass cannon meta, being able to walk up and just one-shot every unit. And then it's made damage dialed back quite a bit, and it's also made each faction now even more dynamic and more challenging in the mid to late game and how to deal with them. And now every fight doesn't necessarily feel the same as it did before this patch. And last but not least, guys, they've added back the weapons that were originally part of weekly bounties. No longer are they a weekly bounty though, they're actually bounties based off of each region. So you'll be able to find the fabled weapons that everyone likes to talk about whenever they're picking up Dorim's guide. And for those of you guys who are new to the channel or new to the community, I highly recommend checking out Dorim's guides. There's going to be a link down here in the description, but there are some unique yellow weapons that were originally part of bounties, but they are now hidden throughout the game, and I'm not going to give you too many spoilers on that, but basically go check out those regions and try to find those bounties for those new weapons, not necessarily new, but the re-added weapons from the weekly bounties. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see more content such as this, like the video, drop a comment, tell me what you're most excited for and playing in this new shadow build, I guess is what I would call it, considering it just basically came out and it wasn't really planned or announced from what I saw. And then most importantly, make that number go up. And until next time, have a good one.